It was the kind of night that swallowed sound, where the city's usual hum of life seemed to retreat into silence. Rain dripped lazily from the rusted awning above a narrow alleyway, collecting into shallow puddles that mirrored the dim orange streetlight. Beneath that flickering glow sat a man, his back against the cold brick wall, clutching a small cardboard sign with shaky hands. The words scrawled in faded marker read, "Just trying to find my way back." His name was Thomas. Once, not so long ago, he had a steady job as a mechanic, a small apartment, and even a cat named Milo who used to curl up beside him every night. But life, as it often does, had taken an unkind turn. A layoff, a few missed rent payments, and then an eviction notice pinned to his door. Within weeks, he found himself living on the streets, where each day bled into the next, and each night brought a new kind of loneliness. That evening, as he sat watching the rain distort the neon signs across the street, Thomas wondered if anyone would ever really see him again. People passed by, umbrellas open, coats wrapped tight, their eyes darting away before they met his. He didn't blame them. He knew how easy it was to turn away from someone else's pain. But then, someone didn't. A woman in her late 30s stopped mid-step. She was holding a grocery bag, her umbrella half collapsed from the wind. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then, she crouched down slightly, bringing herself to his level. "Rough night?" she asked softly. Thomas gave a faint, tired laugh. "They've all been rough lately." She nodded, not in pity but in understanding. "Would you like something warm to eat? I've got extra soup I was taking home." Thomas hesitated. He had learned to be wary, too many promises had come with strings, too many offers had turned into insults. But something about her voice, the gentle steadiness in it, made him nod. She smiled and handed him a container. "It's just chicken and vegetables, but it's hot." He accepted it slowly, the warmth seeping through the plastic into his cold fingers. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'm Nora," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thomas." "Nice to meet you, Thomas," she said as though they were two strangers meeting at a cafe instead of a dark, rain-soaked alley. "There's a shelter a few blocks from here. They let people in around 9. If you want, I can walk you there after you eat." He shook his head. "They're full most nights. I've tried." "Then we'll see," she replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. As Thomas ate, Nora stood nearby, her umbrella tilted to cover both of them from the rain. It was such a small act, holding an umbrella, but for Thomas, it felt like someone had just lifted a bit of the darkness that had settled over him. When he finished, she took the empty container and smiled again. "Come on. Let's go see if they have space tonight." The shelter was indeed full, as Thomas had said. But Nora didn't look discouraged. "There's a diner across the street," she said. "It's open late. Let's get some coffee while we figure something out." Inside, the diner was warm and smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee grounds. They sat in a corner booth, Thomas feeling out of place among the chatter and clinking of cups. He kept his eyes down, afraid of the stares. But Nora just talked, about small things, everyday things. About her work as a nurse, about how she used to come to this diner after long shifts. She didn't ask him for his story, didn't press for explanations. She simply talked to him like a person. After a long pause, Thomas finally said, "Why are you doing this?" Nora looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Because once, someone did it for me." He blinked. "You?" She nodded. "A few years back, after my husband died, I lost myself for a while. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. One night, I ended up sitting outside this same diner, crying like a fool. A stranger stopped and gave me a cup of coffee. He didn't know me, didn't ask questions. Just said, 'You're not alone.' That night, those 3 words kept me going. Sometimes, a little light in the dark is all we need. Thomas didn't know what to say. He stared at his hands, the roughness of them, the way they trembled slightly. "You think it's that simple?" he asked. Nora smiled gently. "Kindness isn't about fixing everything. It's about showing someone they still matter." They talked until the rain eased and the clock neared midnight. Then Nora made a decision. She called her brother, who managed a small repair shop on the other side of town. "Do you still need help in the mornings?" she asked him. After a brief conversation, she hung up and looked at Thomas. "He said you can come by tomorrow. It's not much, just cleaning tools and sweeping floors, but it's a start." Thomas stared at her in disbelief. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said. "You just need someone to believe in you again." For the first time in months, Thomas felt something stir inside him, hope, fragile but real. The next morning, true to her word, Nora met him outside the diner. She brought him a clean shirt and a sandwich wrapped in foil. Together, they walked to the repair shop. Her brother, a large man with oil-stained hands, gave Thomas a wary look but said nothing. He handed him a broom and pointed toward the back. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. Thomas worked quietly, sweeping the floor, organizing tools, running small errands. The rhythm of work steadied him, gave him purpose. Each day, Nora stopped by to check in, bringing lunch or simply sitting with him during breaks. Slowly, he began to open up, telling her bits about his past, about the job he lost, about Milo, the cat he missed. Weeks passed. The chill of winter began to creep into the city, but for Thomas, life felt a little warmer. He found a cot at a small shelter where Nora volunteered, and with the money he earned, he managed to buy a new coat. The nights were still long, but they no longer felt endless. One evening, as they walked out of the shop, Nora looked up at the dim streetlight flickering above. "You know," she said, "I used to hate these broken lights. But now I think there's something beautiful about them. Even when they're fading, they still try to shine." Thomas looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "Yeah," he said softly. "Guess I know how that feels." Months turned into a year. Thomas found steadier work at the shop, and his hands, once cold and idle, were again busy fixing engines and repairing lives in small ways. He saved up enough to rent a small room. On weekends, he volunteered with Nora at the shelter, helping others who were where he once had been. One night, while serving dinner, Thomas noticed a young man sitting alone near the corner. His clothes were thin, his eyes distant. Something about the way he clutched his backpack reminded Thomas of himself. Without hesitation, Thomas walked over and placed a plate of food in front of him. "Here," he said. "It's still warm." The young man looked up, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" Thomas smiled, echoing words that had once changed his own life. "Because someone did it for me." Later that night, as the shelter lights dimmed and the city outside grew quiet, Thomas stood by the window watching the snow begin to fall. He thought about that first night in the rain, the cardboard sign, the empty feeling in his chest, and the moment Nora had stopped. She had shared her light without knowing if it would make a difference. And yet, it had changed everything. It struck him then how one act of kindness never really ends. It moves forward, from person to person, like a candle lighting another in the dark. The flame doesn't weaken, it multiplies. The young man from the corner finished his meal and walked up to Thomas shyly. "Thanks," he said again, his voice quiet. Thomas nodded. "You'll be okay," he said, meaning it. When he stepped outside later, the snow had settled in a soft blanket across the street. The same streetlight from that first night still flickered faintly, but its glow seemed steadier somehow, as though it too had found its strength again. Across the road, Nora waved at him before getting into her car. She rolled down the window and said, "Still finding your way back?" Thomas chuckled. "Think I already did." She smiled. Then maybe now it's your turn to help someone else find theirs. He nodded. That's the plan. As her car disappeared into the snowy distance, Thomas stood under the light, his breath visible in the cold air. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the old cardboard sign he had kept all this time. The words were faded, almost unreadable, but he smiled as he tore it in half. In its place, he pulled out a small notepad and wrote new words, "You matter. Don't give up." The next morning, he placed the note on the bench outside the diner where he once sat alone. Maybe someone would find it. Maybe it would make them stop for a moment. Maybe it would remind them that even in darkness, a shared light can guide the way. And somewhere across the city, as dawn began to rise, a woman named Nora looked out her window at the first hint of sunlight. She smiled, knowing that her small act had started something larger, a quiet chain of kindness, spreading unseen but unstoppable. Because that's how the world changes, not with grand gestures or loud declarations, but with small lights shared in the dark, one heart at a time.